Nothing is worse than being late to the party on a player. And so that's why right now we're going to look ahead to the 2024 free agents to see what guys might be available via trade this coming season. Welcome back to the Dynasty Nerds YouTube page. I am Garrett Price, and we are looking ahead to 2024. Not necessarily because we're in a rebuild and we're looking ahead at future draft classes or anything like that. We want to get ahead of the trade market, the NFL trade market, that is. Now, during the season, we don't typically see a lot of trades, but there still is usually a trade or two that have serious significance for fantasy football that happen most seasons. This past year, Kadarius Toney, Calvin Ridley, TJ Hawkinson, and even Christian McCaffrey were traded in season. So we want to look ahead at some of the guys that are free agents and do some process of elimination. What guys realistically that have their contract expiring this year could be moved? And there's a few different elements that need to be in play. One, where's this team going to be at? Is this team going to be a contender? Is this team going to be at least in the playoff hunt? Or are they going to be pretty terrible? Two, where's this player at in their career? Are they still fairly young? Or are they an aging vet that a team would probably like to move to get some sort of draft capital or some sort of player in return? Lastly, how does the franchise view this guy? Is this a player that is a franchise player, a player that they will want to build around? Or is it a potentially expendable piece that they might be willing to move if the right deal comes along? So even though the list of free agents looks pretty good, there's only a few of them that realistically could get moved at the trade deadline and affect your fantasy football teams. So let's start with the quarterback position. There's really only two guys. It's Ryan Tannehill, Kirk Cousins. The Vikings, with their division, they're probably going to be in it this year. So pretty unlikely that Kirk Cousins moves. Ryan Tannehill isn't a guy that teams are going to make a move for more than likely in season to increase their odds of winning a ship. If they need a guy like Ryan Tannehill, they're probably in pretty bad shape. They're probably not legitimately looking at contending. So there's really not a lot there at the quarterback position. The running back position is probably one of the more interesting positions of all of these that we're going to look at because it's a long list of names. Now, there's plenty that we can kind of eliminate, but it's a long list of names that guys that could potentially be moved. Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, Cam Akers, Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor, J.K. Dobbins, DeAndre Swift, Antonio Gibson, Tony Pollard, and A.J. Dillon are all guys that I identified that would have some sort of fantasy impact if they were moved to another team. Now, some of that might be impact for them, but some of it might be their backups or the guy ahead of them or the guy that they're in a timeshare with. So keep all of that in mind. And I don't have time in this video to go through each individual guy and say the ramifications if they're dealt, but you can determine on your own some key players that you might want to get or some guys that might gain some value if they're moved somewhere else. So guys that I think we can eliminate from this list that are very unlikely to be traded. Jonathan Taylor, very unlikely, even though it's a bad team. That's a team that's building around him. DeAndre Swift, they just acquired him, and they're probably a contender, so they're probably not. Tony Pollard, the Cowboys are most likely in contention, so he's not somebody more than likely to be moved. I really doubt Saquon or Josh Jacobs gets moved. There is some of the stuff with their contract, so I guess there's an outside chance, but that's not one that I'm really keying in on as a potential mover. J.K. Dobbins is another one. I think that this team really likes this guy. If anything, they might let him go in the offseason, but the Ravens are probably one of the better teams in the NFC North, so he's probably not getting moved either. So the guys that we have left here, Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, Cam Akers, Antonio Gibson, and A.J. Dillon. I would say that those guys are the ones that are most likely to get moved. Derrick Henry, there was rumors this offseason he might be dealt. The Titans are probably going to be pretty bad. There could be a team that really could use his services, and we could see a Christian McCaffrey type trade, not for, what Carolina got in return for Christian McCaffrey, but that type of deal for a team that just says, we're going all in. We think we can win it. We're running back away. He could be that guy. Austin Eckler is another one that he actually requested a trade at one point, and then they kind of worked things out, and they're all buddy-buddy now, but he's another one to kind of keep an eye on. Good luck figuring out who the guy is behind him, though. Kelly, Spiller, Roundtree, they've all gotten time. I don't think they're in love with any of them. So it'd be interesting to see if he was moved, what would happen there. Cam Akers, there are some guys behind him, but I don't know that his fantasy value goes up or down much, and I just don't know what team would want him. So even though a move could happen, this probably has a very minimal fantasy impact if so. Antonio Gibson is another one that I could see moved, and that would be a really interesting one because that would free things up for Brian Robinson, but it would also, Antonio Gibson could get to a spot where he's being used a little bit more, and those Antonio Gibson truthers would rejoice. And then A.J. Dillon, the biggest impact would probably be on Aaron Jones, him being gone. Aaron Jones would have the backfield to himself, but depending on the team, there are teams that are looking for between the tackle grinders, somebody that can help grind out the clock. A.J. Dillon could get a small boost in value depending on where that team is. All right, let's go over to the wide receiver position. Some names of interest: Mike Evans, Marquise Brown, Calvin Ridley, T. Higgins, Michael Pittman Jr., Chase Claypool, KJ Osborne, and Donovan Peoples-Jones. Big ones here. I'm really looking at Mike Evans and Marquise Brown. Those are the two that I'm looking at very heavily. I think both of these teams are going to be pretty bad. Both of these teams could be looking to get some draft capital, and both could easily be in the tank for Caleb Williams sweepstakes. So they might not want to win. They might want to get rid of some of the pieces that would help them win on a weekly basis. So I would absolutely be looking at those two. The rest of this list, Calvin Ridley, they just got. T. Higgins, I doubt it. It's a contending team, so I don't think he's going to be dealt. Michael Pittman Jr., the team's going to be bad, but I view him not as highly as I do Jonathan Taylor, but another piece where it seems like the Colts really do want to build around him in the wide receiver room. So it seems unlikely. And I just don't know that KJ Osborne, Chase Claypool, Donovan Peoples-Jones, I have them highlighted. Maybe they get a small boost depending on where they go. But if anything, it would more just be a boost for other pieces around them because that's just a few targets that aren't going those guys' way. Last but not least, the tight end room. And honestly, I don't see a lot of these guys getting moved. Dalton Schultz, Hunter Henry, Evan Ingram, Tyler Higbee, TJ Hawkinson, Gerald Everett. The two big ones I want to highlight because I don't think Dalton Schultz is getting moved. He was just brought in. TJ Hawkinson was just traded for. Evan Ingram, they seem to really like him. They just re-signed him. So the two that I really would key in on is Hunter Henry, who they just brought in Gesicki. So maybe they might be willing to move Hunter Henry if the right deal presents itself. And Tyler Higbee. Tyler Higbee's proved that he can get quite a bit done, and he's had some elite games as a tight end. Remember a few years back, that end of the season run, he absolutely put fantasy football teams on his back. So those are some names to keep an eye on, but it's of all of them, I really want to key in on those 4 or 5 running backs that I mentioned, and Mike Evans and Marquise Brown as real potential candidates get traded, and there'll be huge fantasy ramifications for fallout if that does happen.